Hello everyone, hopefully everyone can hear me now. A complete technical failure on the laptop I was working off there. So can someone confirm they can hear me now okay?
Yes, picking you up there now, Stephen.
Perfect, perfect. We'll try and fix that once David's presenting here. So you won't have heard all my great introduction, so I'll try and do it again very briefly. So again, very much good evening everyone, very much welcome. I'm Stephen Morrison, Head of Sustainable Livestock Systems at AFBI. I'm very much delighted to chair tonight's webinar. It's the very first in the series entitled Grassland Insights. So again, thank you for joining us at what comes to be a promising and very exciting webinar tonight. So the evening's event will really be focused on agile grassland management, really sharing the insights to help plan and optimize grassland use throughout the season, coping with all that variation we experience day and daily caused by the weather, our soil conditions, grass growth and performance. We'll explore the insights from science, from the advisory world, but also on the ground, practical farmer insights, and what really makes things work on farm. So again, a bit of format of the event. The webinar will run for no more than an hour, and I've just lost 5 minutes with that microphone failure, so apologies everyone. We'll begin with the short presentations. David beside me here will start the presentations, then we'll hand our way through our presenters. Towards the end, we'll have a panel discussion, invite a few more individuals into the panel, take questions and answers, or do a question and answer session, and really take time to tackle those topics we've covered during the session. So again, a bit of an instruction here. There's a Q&A button on your screen, so please put your questions through the Q&A selection menu, and we can pick them up and address them at the end. So again, introducing our speakers, and I'm trying to go as quick as possible to get back on time. We've got David Patterson beside me here, agronomist and grassland specialist at AFBI, familiar to many. You'll maybe recognise his face from GrassCheck over the last number of years, and again, very much in partnership with CAFRE and AgriSearch and DAERA. Offers really insights grounded in the latest research in grasslands. Conal Kuhn's got his camera on there as well, and been well known to many of you. Brings that advisor perspective, visiting and helping many farms across the country to make the most for grass and the importance of agile management. And then we've Andrew Clark from Foyle Food Group will join us, and again bringing that experience and that know-how for how grassland underpins their farming systems and what things they've changed over the recent times to manage the variability. So again, housekeeping wise, this is being recorded. You'll have seen something flashing on the screen, and the reason it's recorded is so that for those who couldn't attend this evening, we can maybe record that and share that with them, probably through YouTube at a later date, so they can see this and capture what we've talked about this evening. So again, try to get back on track without any further delay. David's going to share his screen here, and I'll hand straight over to David, who's going to give us the latest insights to grassland performance and management, particularly focused on coping with the variability in our growing seasons. So I'll hand over to David and hand his microphone back to him.
Thanks, Stephen. Well, if you can just wave at me, if you can see my first slide, that's good. Thank you very much. Thank you, Stephen, for the introduction. I'm probably the world's worst person to try and get us back on track on time, but I will do my best. So just to get straight into it, grass is often heralded as, our greatest asset for livestock production farming in Northern Ireland. And of course, I would agree with that. However, there's only a small percentage of our farmers across the country that can actually achieve high figures in terms of, first of all, grass production, and second of all, and the important bit, utilization of grass. That small percentage is achieving 11, 12 tons of dry matter per hectare utilized, but the average farmer out there is way short of that from calculations that have been done. So where does that leave us? There's a massive challenge there, and there's a whole complex of reasons why, and how to improve, first of all, production and utilization of grass. But tonight I want to focus on, and you can see at the top of the slide there, reasons around variability or fluctuations in grass throughout the season and from year to year. We'll try and couple that in as well with reducing input costs, focusing in there on legumes, and then Third of all, looking towards maybe in the medium and longer term, how can we change the swards that we've got across the farm to make better use and to zone in again on that variability across the season. And the overall theme of tonight, as Stephen has said, we're trying to integrate the science and the practice and bring that together in this combination of talks. So what is what's the volatility that I'm talking about? You can see here I just picked out 3 recent years of grass check growth curves for Northern Ireland. And you can see there, I suppose there's 2 or 3 different types of fluctuations going on. The short term, that's day by day, week by week fluctuations that you can't really see on the graphs, but you certainly can see, I hope. Again, Conal, just confirm, can you see my mouse moving on the slide? Yep, brilliant. So you can see there that there's a sort of a characteristic shape across all of the years of this sort of double hump of grass production. This is grass only plus fertilizer, okay? And across the 3 years, you can see that there's quite a bit of variation. The 2022 orange line, there was a massive or a much greater production in that April-May period. But the downside is that in the same year, it was massively below the other 2 years or below the long-term average as well. So we've got seasonal variation, we've got short-term fluctuations day by day, and we've got year-by-year variation, which all sounds quite negative. So how can we cope with that? Well, in GrassCheck in partnership with DARA and AFBI and CAFRE and AgriSearch, we've been monitoring grass growth for over 25 years now. And first of all, in plot data and more recently on farm data, and that's given us opportunity to develop this graze grow model. Picked out 1 year here, just to let you see that the model doesn't always predict the grass growth as accurately as we would wish for, but it's not bad. The error rates are quite low and compares very favorably with any other model that's currently in use. But the practicality of this is we use this every week to relate actual grass growth and project forward 7 and 14 days, and those predictions are useful for grass budgeting. And Conal and Andrew will maybe talk more about that later on, the practical outworkings of that. But that's the grass model that we use, and it's only as good as the accuracy of the weather forecast data that we're pumping into the model every week, and that can fluctuate as well. But it does help with the short-term fluctuations. We've also used the same graze grow model from a more scientific point of view to look at what's going to happen in the future. And if you just zone in maybe on this top graph, first of all, the greeny orange line in the middle shows the typical or the predicted grass yield in Northern Ireland going forward right through to the year 2100. And the orange bars just reflect the degree of variability about that mean. So that's the good news. We're going to get more grass growth with climate change going forward. And I should say we calibrated the model with the 25 years of grass growth that we have already, which gave us the confidence to project forward. The bad news or the challenge in all of this is that April and again in October is where that extra growth is going to come from. We're talking about 2 tons, approximately 2 tons of extra growth from now until the year 2100, and mostly coming at the fringes of the season. In August, and this is typical for most of those summer months, let's say from June through to September, what's going to happen? The greeny blue line there, as you can see, is reasonably flat. So there's not a great deal more production in the summer months, but here's the real kicker is that the orange lines are far apart. So we're going to get much more variable growth during that core grazing season, and that is also a challenge. So there's good news and bad news going forward. Coming back to the here now, what can we do to try and cope with all of this fluctuation and variability? And as I say, Conal and Andrew will deal with more practical things, but I wanted to look at 2 things. One is, can we use fertilizer nitrogen to modify the grass supply curve? And I think you can see here that as we move from the orange line, which is 0 fertilizer, these are grass only plots, to the blue line, which is 135 kgs over the season, and topping out at 270 kgs. So we monitor all these, but all we've really done by adding more fertilizer across the growing season from 0 to 270 is increased or amplified the grass growth curve, not massively changing the shape. But we have to be very efficient with our fertilizer to maximize the amount of fertilizer that ends up in the plant and least going to the environment. So one of the spin-offs from our grass growth modeling from grass check work is looking at this prediction of fertilizer response. And we hope to use this more so in the incoming 2026 growing season. What it basically is figuring out on a week-by-week basis the value in terms of growth, predicted growth of adding fertilizer or not. So where we hope to use this, if there was a period of, let's say, really cold 2 or 3 weeks in June, when you wouldn't expect it maybe, or a very hot, dry period maybe in July, August, we're going to apply this apply to the model with and without fertilizer on a particular week and spin out the forecasts and use that. The practical outworking of this is that farmers will be able to see this almost maybe in a traffic light system as to whether it's worthwhile spending the money and the time spreading the fertilizer in the first place. So that's an additional feature coming through. So in terms of fertilizer use going forward, I think we need more agile fertilizer management, and some of the top grassland managers are already doing this, adjusting rate and timing and the seasonal flexibility of fertilizer use across the season. And we will help with modeling and those additional features, the on-off fertilizer prediction. We're already doing the county by county 7-day growth forecasts, trying to make it more localized and, as I say, improving those predictions under challenging periods through the summer. So using the modeling, using the science to try and give farmers the tools to be able to even out the supply curve of grass throughout the season. The second and maybe more medium to longer term option is looking at what other sward components should we have on the farm. And first of all, I wanted to point out what we could do with reevaluating the existing grasses that are there. And what I've picked out here is from AFBI data, some March-April production of different types of ryegrass. Okay, so you've maybe seen something like this before, but essentially we're comparing hybrid, Italian and perennial ryegrasses, the production up to mid-April. So we're now in spring, and this is the sort of potential that these grasses have. And you can if we circle the Italian ryegrass in the middle there, you can see that every year, 24 right back to 21, and there were different weather patterns through the springs of 21 to 24, you're getting over 2 tons of dry matter production by mid-April. Now this is plot studies, but there's no reason why this can't apply to practical situations on the farm. So if you get the right choices, and the long-term predictions were already telling us there that we're going to get more growth in April. So maybe we should think about having the right grasses on the farm in strategic places to actually make use of that extra growth potential. And the standard perennial ryegrasses, by comparison, are hovering in around just under 1 ton of dry matter. So you're getting an extra ton of dry matter by mid-April by having the right grass choice. And there's other grasses as well. We won't take time to cover these, but there's tall fescues and festuloleums, cocksfoot, which have deeper rooting characteristics as well as complementary growth patterns with perennial ryegrass in a challenging, changeable season. Moving on quickly to the legumes. Again, you've probably heard this before, but legumes offer the ability through nitrogen fixation to reduce costs and help with flattening out the supply curve of herbage. I'll call it herbage this time, throughout the growing season. There's also cost savings to be had. A grass clover system from research has shown that when you compare that with a grass only with grass only sward system with 150 kilograms of nitrogen over the year. It gives similar output in terms of grass and livestock output, but saving about 11 bags per hectare of 27% nitrogen. That's the equivalent. So there's significant financial savings, and that's particularly topical at the moment. And second of all, clovers and legumes offer this opportunity to stabilize the growth over the growing season. And I'll back that up just with some, like 2025 was a really good grass growing year. These are I've just picked out 3 of the results of some of our plot studies where we have grass 270, clover 0 and clover 67, and you can see the interesting point for me is that there's 2 lines overlapping here in the spring of 2025, which, like we say, was a good year. So the grass 270 and the clover 67, which are massively different in fertilizer use, obviously, but they're tracking along the same trajectory in terms of monthly growth or monthly production. And then even more advantageous is what happens in the late summer. So, you know, there's extra production when the grass only plots, even with all that fertilizer, when the grass naturally declines through the late summer, the clover boosts and increases overall herbage supply. So already we're starting to maybe even some of the seasonal differences that we highlighted earlier. And it's not just about yield and production, it's about quality. Animals eat energy and protein and everything else that's in the biomass. So the monthly yields, again, look at the blue line, that's the monthly yield of grass only swards, and that peaks obviously in April, May, June time. Contrast that with the clover 0, no fertilizer whatsoever. Its monthly yield of crude protein, not quite as high, but that peaks in the late summer. So you're also balancing out the nutrient supply as well as the actual herbage growth. Switch over to silage swards very quickly. Time's marching on. Red clover, we have a project called Zero and Sile, which operates with ourselves and Agri-Search, and most importantly, 12 commercial farmers out around the country, scattered around Northern Ireland, who have had a go with red clover swards silage production. Okay, so they have a silage sward, they have a red clover field alongside a regular grass reseed. And what we've presented here is the megajoules, the energy yield. So this is the energy concentration in the herbage multiplied by the actual yields across first, second, and third cut. And you can see that the energy yield was about the same in the clover versus grass cut 1, second cut, there was an increase, and third cut there was a massive increase, and that's mostly due to clover peaking in sort of from July onwards, and that is one of the farmers' fields over on the left-hand side there in midsummer. So there's a massive improvement there in terms of energy yield, and like red clover grass swards are not for everybody and they're not for every field, but this just shows the potential. I did say we're going to talk about cost savings as well, and here we go. For the actual amount of fertilizer nitrogen, not the organics. So there was a lot of slurry put onto these swards as well, which is very useful and complementary to the fertilizer nitrogen. 80 kilograms of nitrogen approximately going onto the red clover swards, compared with, in the same farms, about 230 kgs of N going on to the regular grass silage fields. And even at 370 pounds a tonne, which is obviously changing at the moment in terms of costs, that translates into a saving of about £200 per hectare, or 80 plus pounds per acre. So there's economic saving as well as helping to harness the value of nitrogen fixation. There's other species that we can bring into the equation, and the two obvious ones beyond adding in clover is to look at herbs, plantain and chicory in particular, with their deep rooting characteristics. Grazing trial with dairy cows and grass plantain, no clover this time, just grass and plantain. And you can see in this middle section of the chart, this just represents the botanical composition and how it changes across the season. And hopefully you can see, you had about 50-50 grass to plantain in that sward to your left-hand side, about 50-50 in the spring. That peaks up to maybe about 70-30 of grass to plantain in June, as you might expect. But again, here we go. As the grass declines through the rest of the season, the plantain proportion increases. So the two species are very complementary, and again helps to iron out the supply curve and reduce some of that variation. Earthworm populations are boosted beneath these swards, and in a multi-species sward, we had a trial there for 2 years where it even showed average daily gains were improved even further in these multi-species swards. So how do we bring this all together? Time's nearly up. We've talked a lot about variation. There was some good news, some bad news. We've talked about short-term fixes and agile fertilizer management and different sward types. How do we pull that together in a farm situation? Every farm has some of these field characteristics, from the less productive corners of fields right through to the dry, maybe even drought-prone south-facing slopes with excellent drainage and everything in between. What we need to do is sit down with the farm map and start to categorize fields, just group them together, color code them, whichever way you do it, and bring together core grazing fields, maybe around the farmyard, and outlying areas for silage or heifer grazing, whatever it may be. And then start to tailor what swards we put into which scenario. Those core grazing areas, it's still going to be based on perennial ryegrass. Can we consider adding in clover? Maybe plantain. Some of those fields maybe you could devote to Italian and hybrid to get that extra bite of grass, that extra tip of grass in the spring. These silage or outfields could be, instead of conventional grass and nitrogen, could be considered for grass red clover swards. So Stephen, I'll bring it to a close there, and just some final points just to sum up. For future-proofing our grassland, I think we need more agile management, and you're about to hear more practical applications of that from Conal and Andrew. We need to, from a science point of view, we need to keep developing these technological advances and bring those out to the farming community so that you can get benefit for managing variability of grass. In the slightly longer term, maybe not. Maybe you could earmark some of those fields on your farm map already that could be thought of for maybe reseeding for grass clover or for red clover for silage, perhaps, maybe even multi-species in some fields. And finally, as I've just said, matching the sward type to the field. So overall, there's good news. There's going to be more growth. As you saw in those predictions, there's going to be more growth in Northern Ireland grassland in the future. But I think we just need to be smart about how we manage it and try and flatten out that supply curve, make it easier to manage, and harvest some of the benefits from that. Okay, Stephen, I'll finish there.
Thank you. David, confirm you can hear me, because this is the third or fourth microphone.
You're on.
Can you hear me okay?
You're loud and proud. Yep. I'll stop sharing.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you, David. So thank you. Very interesting and very much a thought-provoking presentation, really highlighting a number of techniques, the role of different species and tools such as grass check. Big thank you to AgriSearch, Caffrey, Deere and the partners in grass check, and also that network of farms around Northern Ireland are really critical to the success of that project. We'll keep things moving, and we're going to hand straight over to Conal. So if Conal wants to load up his presentation there. And Conal's going to provide us some insights to what works on the farms, what sort of top tips and recommendations on farms. We're seeing your emails at the minute, whoever that is, and how do we manage the variability of grass growth throughout this season. So Conal, hopefully is your screen. There we go. I can see your screen now, Conal. You're on mute there. Do you want to unmute? That's you.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you. Welcome, everyone, and I'm pleased to be here, folks. I'm just going to start straight in. My name's Conal Keown. I work as a dairy advisor here with Caffrey, mostly in the east of the country. And I suppose from moving on from David's conversation and talk, you know, he mentioned agility in management, and I think, you know, this is what I want to talk about, exactly that flexibility in systems and flexibility in management to be able to overcome the challenges that we have got this spring in particular. I'm probably going to be a wee bit more narrow, and I'm really going to only really focus on this last basically two weeks and the challenges that have been so far. Let's see. So moving on. So what have the challenges been then so far in the the grazing season so far in Northern Ireland. And I suppose these are a couple of the challenges here I've highlighted here in terms of delayed turnout, wet ground conditions. We have certainly had a very wet winter, and it's playing havoc on the farm, and it's really challenging the resilience of our dairy farmers to try and deal with that. Some of the things that are coming up from farms is we've got heavy grass covers on farms. So that in itself is a challenge, getting that graze down to the correct height. In some cases, there's no slurry applied, especially on grazing areas. And the percentage of the grazing block on one farm in particular in the Ards Peninsula, I came across there was 10% of his farm, especially his grazing block, that was actually underwater at the end of February. So these are new things to me. I've never seen that before, but that has happened this year. In terms of nitrogen, getting that plant fed, there's been a major delay in nitrogen applications across the country, and with zero spread and zero grazing effectively done. Certainly by the end of February, there was very little or no grazing done. Farm laneways then another challenge, and a lot of farms with washout and problems in that front, limiting access and being a real problem on farm in terms of getting that early grass into cows. So I suppose what I really want to talk about this evening is how do farmers deal with this, and how do we plan to overcome these challenges. Thinking back to David's presentation, there's going to be more growth, but possibly at difficult times of the year. So how do we actually utilize that growth and get that grass into cows? So why do we need to focus on grass? And I suppose it's about going back to basics. It's about looking at grass, and grass is our cheapest feed. It is readily available, and it is a huge competitive advantage here in Northern Ireland. The statistics on the graphic to the side highlights from CAFRE benchmarking data in 2024 and 23. It just plots the linkage between milk produced from grass, grazed grass and forage, and the impact on farm profitability. So effectively it's saying the more grass and forage we can put into a cow, the more profitable your business will be. And that is a very important thing. So, it's fair to say then, from that we need to grow more grass. David has just told us we're going to grow more grass from a climatic perspective, but we also need to utilize that grass in a cow's diet. And I suppose the challenge this year, and we've seen this challenge before, the challenge is how do we do that? How do we practically get cows to grass to utilize that grass? And it's about getting more grass and into the cow's diet. And March in the springtime in March is a key area. It's a key time for us to get that right on farm. That early grazing and that first grazing rotation, it's when the whole thing comes together for a farm. It's when you set up the farm for the rest of the season. If we take a typical 150 cow dairy herd with a 40 hectare grazing block, that 40 hectares has the potential to supply 90% of the dry matter intake required for that herd for eight and a half months of the year. So that's how important it is, and that's why the farmers that understand this point are really keen to focus on the spring setting up of the grazing block especially. Again, March, as I mentioned, it's that first rotation. It's getting the plant started to grow. It's kick-starting the whole thing, and it's also the start of the nutrient management process on the farm. So, what fertilizers, what organic fertilizers are used on the farm in terms of slurry and farmyard manure, and what then is needed to bring onto the farm in terms of chemicals. chemical fertilizer products, you know, to not only feed the grass plant, but to feed that soil fertility end of things, you know, and this spring has been really difficult in terms of getting slurry applied. You know, a lot of farms with very little slurry applied at this stage still. And, you know, in a grazing perspective, it's nearly, the window has been nearly missed effectively now, because we're now trying to graze that grass. So practically getting slurry onto grazing ground is extremely difficult and a real challenge at farm level. So I suppose what are we looking at then in terms of the tools? What tools are required on farm to try and manage this situation? You know, how can a dairy farmer implement these tools? And I suppose what I want to talk about on this in this section is what has actually worked extremely well over this past 2 to 3 weeks on farms. The first point here I've got is targets. I think it's absolutely critical that our farms have targets. The best grassland farmers out there have targets. Okay, it's a fair point to say that we're not going to hit those targets this year, but you still have a target to work towards and work around. As far as I can see, just looking at grass growth data and grass grazed so far on farms, we're probably going to be about 10 to 20 days later on those sharper managed grassland farms than any other year before. But that doesn't mean that it's still not worth chasing. And, you know, especially here in Northern Ireland, where we've got a lot of farms with compact autumn block calving systems, you know, a lot of herds have a high grazing demand, especially now in March, because a lot of cows are through lactation, they're back in calve, and that gives us a fantastic opportunity to really capitalize on grass now as we speak, if we can only manage to get cows out and not do too much damage. So the other key point here is that weekly farm walk. You might ask yourself, what exactly does that mean? But effectively what I'm talking about here is a farmer getting out, looking at that farm grazing block and making assessments, monitoring those targets, looking to see how the pre-grazing cover is going, how the post-grazing cover is going. Yes, he may well be measuring grass in that farm walk, but effectively there's more important things that can be done. And 80-90% of the time, that farm walk and the farmer will realize that his land and ground is actually drier and more ready for grazing than he actually might think. You know, ground conditions have been a real challenge this year, and unless you get out and walk through your grazing block and see those conditions, you will not be aware of what they are like. You know, from BSG events run through Caffrey, these are the key messages we're trying to get out across, especially in County Down this last sort of month. We've been trying to illustrate the point that you have to be proactive, and I suppose back to David's point, you have to be agile in the management approach to capitalizing and utilizing that grass. And that farm walk, possibly the most valuable hour of the week in a good grassland farmer's time frame, is that grass walk. Yes, using the grass check data is also very important in that farm walk, and possibly more important this year so far has been assessing the daily intake of herds. So a lot of grazing so far this year has been very on and off. So the cows have only been out for maybe 2 or 3 hours. So it's establishing how much grass is actually being taken off by the herd in those 2 or 3 hours. It generally ranges from about 3 to 5 kilos of dry matter per cow, which is a small element of the dietary requirement of the cow, but still it's getting some grass into that cow. It's started the grazing process, and it will only build as weather improves. Next point then is the upskill in grazing management. Again, a large part of the BSG material covered this month will be on this very subject. So I suppose what has worked well on farms and maybe what hasn't worked so well. The on-off grazing has been pivotal this year, more so than any other year. I think it's fair to say that very few farmers are out full time grazing at this point in time, but whatever grazing has been done has generally been achieved through on and off grazing. And what I mean by that is simply cows put out for 2 or 3 hours and then taken back in again. It's played a key role, and the whole skill set around on-off grazing, in terms of silage management in the shed and using morning milkings and holding batches back before they're put out to grass, is all critical key skills that a farmer now needs to be able to manage if they're going to capitalize on that grass. That is a very important aspect as an important technique to have, but equally important is once the cows are out and it's about protecting that regrowth. So how can we make sure that the regrowth isn't going to be damaged by this moving cows out and bringing them off very quickly? So using things like back fences and excellent infrastructure is all a prerequisite for good high standard grazing management. Multiple accesses to paddocks is another key area that has become under pressure this year, especially in paddocks that are maybe heavy grass covers, are really difficult to get grazed down simply because you can't get the cows back in and out of them in an easy fashion. The other big one that has raised its head this year is cows out when it's raining. And, it seems very simple, but, even a half hour with consistent rain and cows out in a field, they can really make a mess. So there's a simple rule of thumb now on a lot of dairy farms. If it's raining, bring the cows in. They generally don't be eating grass. They generally be walking about in the rain and doing damage. So that's an interesting one that has really come home this year to settle itself. The infrastructure piece is vital. I think wet farms, dry farms, it doesn't really matter. You need excellent infrastructure on your farm to be able to capitalize on that early season grass and set up your farm for the 8-9 months ahead. In actual fact, wetter farms probably need slightly better infrastructure, and what I'm talking about there is laneways, fences, spur laneways, access points. That's all critically important, and the key reason it's important, and you can see from some of the pictures, it's about avoiding compaction. We don't want to compact the soil and adversely affect growth in the second rotation. We don't want to damage any soil structure. It is counterproductive to the whole process. So that is vital, of vital importance. Other areas that are also equally as important are things like software. AgriNet is delivering a lot in terms of its ability to measure grass and especially the ability to predict grass growth as we go through the week. Generally speaking, getting farmers more familiar and upskilling them on those whole areas of grass growth rates, average farm covers, grass demand. These are some of the skills that I feel over the years have maybe been eroded in a certain way, and it's possibly a big missing link to our puzzle here now in Northern Ireland is getting those skills, those basic grassland management skills, to be able to manage and be agile around capturing and utilising that grass.
Conal, just to interrupt there, apologies interrupting, just conscious of time, I'm about 30 seconds.
No problem. I'll wrap up here fairly quick, Stephen. So just moving very quickly on to the very final slide then, we've got the importance of soil, and I'm sure there'll be more detail on soil and further webinars with AFBI, but soil is vitally important in this whole process, and it's the foundation of any successful farm system. And I suppose the leaving point I'll leave you on is, what percentage of your farm is optimal for pH, P and K, in terms of growing grass. And on that, and in the interest of time, I'll call it a close. And thank you.
Thank you very much, Conal. Hopefully my microphone's working again. Again, thank you for the reflection on what has been an incredibly challenging start to 2026. There's no farm in the country that hasn't had the challenge of this weather that we've been experiencing. Fingers crossed it's on the improvement. Very much thank you for the practical, insightful tips and highlighting the importance of grass, be that silage or grazing. Again, just a reminder, while Andrew is loading up his presentation there, put your Q&A, put your questions in the Q&A, and we'll pick those up at the end of the webinar. So again, I'll move straight into Andrew. He's going to talk us through managing the grassland situation on the farms at Foyle. I'm just going to hand straight over to Andrew to get started. Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you, Stephen. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Yep. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Look, just straight in here, folks. So look, my name's Andrew Clark. I am an agriculture manager at Foyle Food Group, but those of you may know, we also operate a demonstration farm outside Cookstown, and we have a finishing unit. But today I'm going to talk about our grassland farm and what we have in that aspect. So we have hill farm and a lowland grazing platform. Okay, so starting on the left hand side, the hill farm, currently 570 acres, and in 2026 we're hoping to bring on another 380 acres to that. So currently 180 suckler cows and then we're moving now to about 240 in 2026. That's a moderate sized suckler cow, demonstrating the influence of superior genetics on those low mature weight suckler cows and upland hill conditions, with an emphasis on ecosystem beneficial for biodiversity within that system. That system is currently managed via virtual fencing collars, so rotational grazing system to a certain extent is operated within that system. So not going to talk a lot about that tonight. We're going to speak more about the lowland grazing platform and how we manage that in reflection with weather patterns and grass growth and demand of the cattle versus grass growth. So the lowland grazing platform, there is currently 200 acres dedicated totally to grazing cattle on the lowland platform. Up to 500 cattle are grazed on that platform throughout the spring, summer and autumn months. Suckler cows will graze part of that pasture as they calve in the spring before they're moved to the hill. Also their progeny will be grazed on that, so their over-year progeny plus then some purchased stores will be grazed on that platform, and then they will be further finished indoors. So look, utilisation of the pasture to drive animal performance. It's a paddock grazing system, and we want efficient response to our chemical fertilizers used on the farm. So look, I suppose just a brief summary of the lowland pasture. Fully committed to grazing, as I said, grazing our purchased stores and our homebred suckler cows, or suckler cow progeny, sorry. Suckler cows are grazed early spring, And look, the focus of that system, as I say, is to utilize grass, the efficiency of the stock, grazing that grass, and then the performance that we get per acre of grassland. So we're trying to maximize the grass growth on the paddock system, but also maximize the livestock performance from that grass. And I suppose that this slide here, sorry, I've lost my screen. Sorry, this slide here will outline our journey within grassland management.
Andrew, you just stop sharing your screen there. If you want to reshare there.
All right.
That's you. Yep, perfect. Thank you.
So this slide here outlines our journey within our grassland management. So pre-2008, we were a set stocking system, and in 2008 we dipped our toe within the paddock system setting. So we moved to 4 paddock mobs, and then in 2009 we moved to 8 paddock mobs. Then moving on within our journey, we aspired to improve our paddock management and improve our stocking density on the paddocks. In 2016, we started measuring our grass on the paddock system, trying grass check. In 2019, we started different projects looking at multi-species swards. The multi-species swards work well for us, but the longevity of the swards, we found that a challenge. So we probably have moved on now from that. In 2023, we started to look a bit more at our soil, physical and chemical and biological testing of our soil. 2024, then we started using the Soil Mentor app. So that was baselining all our paddocks, so getting an understanding of the biological and fungi life within our soil. I suppose it's a bit of a regen application to benchmarking and identifying indicators of soil health and monitoring, I suppose, our position. And in the future, we will be able to refer back to that baselining project and see how we have impacted soil health through different practices within our grassland and soil management. So look, a big part of what we're doing on our grassland is really utilizing our foliar nitrogen and our toe and fert machines. So we have introduced our toe and fert in 2022. That really feeds the biological aspect of our grasslands and our soil. It also has allowed us the opportunity to really reduce our chemical inputs within the soil. All right, so in terms of current as grassland management, so we're on the 8 paddock system, grazing blocks of roughly 16 acres, and these blocks are measured weekly. Our target at peak stocking density, we're aiming for 1,200 kgs of live weight per acre. Okay, so I suppose it's all about managing the demand of the cattle within the paddocks. So we're operating the paddock system, focusing on the golden rule of 3, 3 leaves, 3 weeks, and graze your grass in 3 days. So focusing on higher intakes, better regrowths, improved nitrogen response, and reduced herbal wastage. So this wee slide here, folks, just outlines, I suppose, our targets. We spoke earlier about, targets from our grasslands, and this outlines our target from our paddock system in terms of stocking density. So we're aiming to achieve our 1,200 kilograms of live weight per acre for 3 months of the year. So average livestock performance, so our average daily live weight gain, we would see from our paddock system is about 0.8 kilograms of daily live weight gain per day, which is something that we're fairly content with. So look, in terms of live weight gain per acre, our target is to gain 366 kgs of live weight per acre. Potential return, you can see there just on the slide, at 366 kgs at, we'll call it 350 kilo, 350 pence per kilo gives us a return per acre at 1281. So just something that we look at in terms of maximizing potential from our grasslands, and I suppose demonstrating the value that can be achieved from your grasslands. And I suppose, look, grass budgeting and decision making, this is just how we operate. So flexible and data-driven management. So as I said earlier, we measure our grass on a weekly basis using the plate meter. Our data is uploaded to the AgriNet software and enables confident and timely grazing decisions. So like quite often we're using our AgriNet software to identify paddocks which need reseeded. It allows us to measure or monitor our grass growth throughout the year and just make adjustments to our grazing management in response to the supply of grass that we have. So currently growing 12 tonne of dry matter per hectare. I think the Northern Ireland average is somewhere in the region of 5 tonnes. So our target pre-cover is somewhere in the region of 3,000 to 3,300 kilograms of dry matter per hectare. Our post-grazing cover is between 16 and 18 kilograms of dry matter, and anything over 3,500 is removed for silage. So just managing supply versus demand. So in terms of when grass growth is greater than the demand, we will remove paddocks for silage. Increasing the stock density is not a preferred option, but it may be something that we could do in terms of whenever the growth is less than the demand. So that will obviously come in the shoulders of the year. So in terms of reducing our stocking density is probably what we find we're doing every year, coming around July, August time. So we're removing cattle from the grazing platform. So we're probably sitting at that 200 acres of grazing. We're probably sitting around 500 cattle on that platform for about 3 months, and then as grass growth reduces into the autumn months, we're pulling numbers from that platform and then finishing those in the house. And there is the other opportunity through the autumn time to bring in some of the silage ground into the grazing platform as well. And then look quickly just around the tow and fert and what we're doing with that on the farm. So as I say, our tow and fert has been in operation for around 5 years now. We have had significant reductions in our chemical nitrogen usage through the tow and fert. On the screen there, you can see the costs. I'm not going to go through them all in the interest of time, but just in terms of our tow and fert mixture, we have added some biological stimulants to the mix, just to really focus on soil health and that biological aspect of the soil. We're on lime flour, molasses, seaweed, humates, also some vermicast. So look, we're growing 12 tonnes of dry matter per hectare with a really significant drop in our chemical nitrogen usage. We're measuring our grass on a weekly basis, so it is proven. And we're seeing other benefits in terms of filtration of our soils. The health and structure of our soils is improving. So that is, as David highlighted earlier, the opportunity for extra grass to be growing in the shoulders of the year. Well, potentially we need to start looking maybe a bit deeper into our soil structure and how we can manage the greater grass growth potential with a better soil structure. And then just I suppose outlining our key focus into the future. So optimizing our soil health and fertility. So I mentioned earlier about baselining every field on the grazing platform. So improved slurry and manure management practices. So very important. Slurry is a very important part of our grazing platform to really boost growth. Reducing chemical inputs through our tone fert machine, focusing on clover quite heavily. Clover swards probably fit better into our management style rather than multi-species. I would say that'll be our biggest focus going forward, is to adopt more clover swards rather than the herbs. Just I suppose our biggest issue with the multi-species had been managing weeds and weed control, and I suppose we have more opportunity with the clover swards to help mitigate against that. And then improving on our 12 tonne of dry matter per hectare with the limited chemical inputs. Folks, that brings me to the end of my slides, so thank you for allowing me to share.
Thank you very much, Andrew, for taking us through this sort of journey of grassland management over a number of years with the Foyle Group. Very impressive performance, and how you've used agile grass management and monitoring and measurement to really inform that. So very, very impressive. I suppose I'll just sort of wrap it up here. And again, apologies for being a little bit over. I do want to give a wee bit of time for the panel. So if you can stay with us for a little bit longer, please do. I think it's fair to say that we've had 3 excellent presentations, giving a range of views and experience on managing grass to support our productive livestock farming. So if everyone's content, if the panelists could join us, we're going to open up to some panel discussion. Again, keep your questions coming through in the Q&A. So join us in the panel. We've got Eileen McCluskey, Senior Technologist at CAFRE. So hopefully Eileen is there. If all the speakers want to turn their cameras on, I can see them on a screen, hopefully. Eileen brings a wealth of experience and well known to many of us. We've got Trevor Somerville, beef farmer and also UFU, and he could join us and give us a feel for the importance of grass, grazed or silage on his farm and how he manages that throughout the season. So hopefully that's all our panelists and speakers back, and say please stay with us if you can for a few more minutes, and we'll have a little bit of a question session. I'll just check the questions here. And hopefully as a good chair, I've got a few questions ready to go as well, just in case. So I'll bring in Eileen. If Eileen is there, can you shout at me, Eileen? I can't see you, but yeah, there we go.
Can you see me? I can hear you. Yeah.
I can hear you, but I can't see you. So bringing in Eileen, really thinking of grassland management, you've heard a lot of talks there this evening, and again, we've touched probably a little bit more in the lowlands, and I know Andrew touched a little bit on the uplands. Could you give us a feel for some of the strategies that are working well in more of the upland hill areas to best utilise grass during that season, maybe from a beef sheep perspective, maybe?
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you, Stephen. Look, the previous speakers made lowland grazing sound quite complex, and I think maybe it is quite complex, but then we go to the uplands, and I suppose it can be quite a sort of difficult and challenging sort of habitat to manage. I suppose first and foremost, Stephen, uplands can be very different, and every farm will have a range of resources, and you have to play to your strengths and the resources you have. So most upland farms will have, majority will be that upland type vegetation, but there will be areas of marginal semi-improved, better quality grassland, and I say first and foremost you want to prioritise that. So for conserved forages, your silages, for example, the group of stock that's most needed to that. So I'm just thinking like maybe young lambs immediately post lambing or weaning point of time. So prioritise that, but do not underestimate the potential for productivity on those other obviously marginal areas of their farm. So I suppose if we think then about how we would best manage the likes of those upland sort of habitats, it can be quite complex. You do need that sort of like multi sort of factorial type approach. You want to drive productivity, but ultimately what will drive productivity on those marginal areas is managing that habitat and that range and that real wide diversity of species of vegetation to maximize output. So I suppose first and foremostly, might be quite a vast area. We still need to have a good grazing management type system. So have a plan in place to graze that, habitat. And I would say, it's seasonal, but potentially, the seasonality might just not be as tight, I suppose, when we think about some of our lowland grazing type systems. So what you really want to do is try and match the right grazing density or the grazing pressure to the type of habitat that you have. So in the summertime, you will have a higher sort of level of grasses, Stephen. So get in there and graze those grasses down. There'll be plenty of nutritional value in there, and graze them appropriately, that you manage them appropriately, but also be mindful that, we do have to, there's a requirement to manage that shrub vegetation too, and, grazing later on into the season and maybe throughout the winter, there is a requirement there. I suppose then it's also targeting the right type of livestock, the right species. So there can be lots of benefits to having a multi-species approach, both cattle and sheep, not on your deep peat areas, but on your sort of like marginal grassy dominant areas like your Millennias and your Nardus. Benefits there to have a multi-species approach, cattle and sheep together, or in a rotational type system. The cattle will come in there and take out that long stemmy type grass. They're less selective, and then that leaves maybe a nice sort of like that shorter, more nutritional type species for your sheep coming along there as well. So have that sort of multiple sort of species approach, and that will ultimately drive the quality of your habitat, and that will drive the quality of the vegetation and the nutritional value of the vegetation. I suppose maybe to touch on some other things, and I know maybe they're not available to everybody, Stephen, but if you have the tools available to you, or if you like the virtual fencing, for example, to help manage those stock in those larger areas and target grazing at the right times throughout the year, that can also be sort of really, really beneficial. But ultimately, you really want to do is target the species of vegetation that you want to graze it appropriately with the right type of stock throughout the grazing season, and by improving the quality of that vegetation, you will ultimately improve the nutritional value and the productivity that vegetation can deliver across the farm.
No, thank you, Eileen. So sort of that mosaic approach type illustration that David had, but applying that more in an upland to account for the topography, the vegetation types, the animal types, and sort of being very agile to move around that during the season. Trevor, I've got to bring Trevor in, I think. Yeah, I can see Trevor there. From the presentations and the discussions tonight, are there any sort of techniques, tips, approaches that you're already doing on your farm where you can see that clear benefit?
Just sort of what Conan kind of talked on, you have to be adaptable. It's not a case of turning everything out tomorrow because it's the 1st of March, or well, we're past the 1st of March now, but the same as just getting some cattle turned out in drier parts, and then making the same equally in the back end whenever you want to maybe extend the grazing season for your later stock again, and then target your bigger stock with good forage and stuff to try and get them finished a bit sooner. It's not, I think with Northern Ireland, the grass growth being that variable during the year that we're never going to be fit to graze everything on our farms for the whole year. So we have to be adaptable with the stock that we do graze, and kind of keep focusing, trying to get it, maximize as much grass into them sort of stock that can utilize it the best kind of thing for the whole season. It's just one of the main things. And then for anybody just starting off on the rotational grazing, like us, you just don't do it all at the same time. You try and start off with your bigger fields and split them in two. And I suppose the first thing is going by an electric fence would be a start, and then kind of move from that and just get your burns, because what we're talking about tonight's all guidelines. There's no real, like, don't be afraid to make an odd mistake now and again. You're not going to get it perfect the whole year sort of thing. There's going to be times that you'll have to top a bit, or you mow too much, or you might have to feed an odd round bale out or something. It's not, or you might tramp a field. It's not the end of the world. You just keep trying again the next time sort of thing.
Yeah, no, I think you're really highlighting there is that willingness to adapt and be flexible and try things, and not everything will work, but you've tried it and you learn from it, and you know for the next time. And I suppose that you hear it quite often too, one of the best investments on the farm is the electric fence and the reel, to be able to sort of set up and be flexible, put your paddocks in place, etc., and move them if you need to be. I suppose I'm going to bring in Andrew there. When you were sort of starting off that journey to put up your paddock systems and create that flexibility in your system, what worked and what didn't work at that phase? Following on from Trevor.
Yeah, look, I suppose we set up our paddocks. Our infrastructure was, I suppose, quite it was quite vague at the start, but then we developed what worked for us, and I suppose sharing drinking trucks and different infrastructure techniques and tips that you I suppose pick up during the process, and you just adapt on that. But I think just really what works for us is the 8 paddock system, 21-day rotation, 3 days in and then rest your paddock. So that's kind of where we're at. It has worked well. We're happy with the results. I suppose we have adapted our journey in terms of maybe the species that we're sowing. You know, at one stage we're a monoculture grasses, then we went to multi-species, and now we're changing now, I suppose, to a variety of grass species and clover alongside that. So I suppose our journey has adapted. 8 paddock system within the mob is probably where we're settling at the minute.
Oh, thanks, Andrew. There's a question in the chat there. I don't know, we've got follow-up webinars in this series where we're going to touch a little bit more into fertilizer, but I'll pull out a part of the question there about nitrogen on clover swords. Maybe David, do you want to come in there? The question here is about nitrogen on clover swords in the spring to boost production. What effect does that have on clover over the season? So any thoughts just on the fertilizer with clover and how that all works?
Yeah, short answer, it's a negative effect on clover. So there's 2 parts to it. First of all, most of the nitrogen will be taken up by the grass. The clover will also take up some fertilizer nitrogen, but the snag is if it's too much. It's one thing putting on what I call a jag of nitrogen in the spring to get the whole sward moving, but if you continue with that through into early summer and so on, it will, first of all, the grass will compete too much with the clover, and second of all, every granule of nitrogen fertilizer depresses nitrogen fixation.
Yeah, so you start to lose the benefit of the legume, really,
I'm
in terms of
afraid so. It all depends maybe where you're starting from. If you're already on a quite heavily stocked farm, it's going to be a much bigger adjustment. But if folks out there maybe get a bit of a reality check and think, well, what actual stocking rate do I have on my farm, especially on the grazing platform? And if it's not super high, well, then there's even more opportunity to get the benefits of clover.
And again, so just follow up, we'll be touching on fertilizer management. I think it's webinar number 3. I think there's a bit more on fertilizer management and when to reseed. So we'll cover the questions about protected urea and fertilizer there a bit more. Any other questions anyone on the panel wants to ask each other? I always forget to do that in webinars. You know, does anyone want to pick the brain of someone else on the speakers of the panelists? I'd say if not, conscious, and I'm very sorry about running over time a little bit. Completely my fault with technical failures at the start. But Trevor, it's okay to hand over to you. I know there'll be a feedback survey coming up at some point in time. But Trevor, can I hand over to yourself, maybe just to sort of summarize and wrap up the first in the series of the webinars?
There was another question maybe in the thing there, Stephen, but maybe you didn't see it.
Oh, yeah, give me a second. I'll just log in there. Oh, yeah, I've just refreshed. Yeah, can't go point. So the question here is for Connell. Can Connell point to report or a paper on the impact of infrastructure on compaction and management? So really, is there something there that we can really refer to about the importance of that infrastructure? Getting those laneways and roadways and gate access points, etc., all correct?
Yeah, it's a good question, Stephen. Most of my material here is based on actual farmer experience, and it's part of the BSG program to be sort of out and looking at seeing best practice on farm, and that's where that's coming from. So it's I suppose the investment certain farmers have made in infrastructure and the difference it has made in terms of days at grass, I suppose, if you want to really simplify it, and it is significant. Not sure if there's any actual papers on it in terms of research. I'm sure AFBI yourselves have maybe.
Well, I suppose similar to yourself, Connell, that been out on quite a lot of farms, that ability to get out to paddocks, get in and out of paddocks easily, even if it is only for a few hours, is incredibly important. So getting the infrastructure right, and again, under the beef farm too, having the fencing right and the structures right that you can move around paddocks in an easy way is really critical. So again, really important piece to element. Just conscious in the Q&A, you'll just see it there if you want to click into that button. there's a webinar and survey there, and really appreciate if you would fill in that survey, because that one, it gives us a feel of what you liked about this particular webinar or what you didn't. Give us your honest opinion, please, but also what any other webinars or events coming up, what you would like the topics to be. We'll have this next series of 3 set, but we could do more going forward. Trevor, I'll hand over to you now. Apologies.
No, just to close tonight there, I'd like to thank all the speakers for their very interesting presentations. And thanks to all the people who logged in tonight and who registered for the webinar. And it'll get the recording and it'll be available for anybody that wants to see the things again. I suppose just for me, some of the take-home messages would be just, David, you showed there that kind of this difference. There's not just necessarily grass for every field. You kind of can, some parts of the country, for such a small country, we're very variable, and you can consider some of the likes of your multi-species and your red clover and stuff, and try and pick the field that suits them best. And maybe if you were prone to drought areas or something, maybe there would be more benefit to you in the future. I think Conan showed the importance of the infrastructure and the getting the stock out early to try and get a grass wedge developed early in the year, so you're not cutting a whole pile of silage around mid-May or into June and then you're running out of grass in July again, sort of thing. It's just, I think, well, particularly this year, you've seen the benefits of your lanes and stuff, and it can be challenging on fragmented beef farms or sheep farms, and it's maybe not just as set up for 2 or 3 hours grazing here or there, but there's always opportunities to get some stock out, regardless if the weather is a wee bit in our favour. I think, Andrew, you showed the importance of the rotational grazing and the development that it has done on the Foyle farm this last lot of years, and how it has brought just probably financial benefits as well, and then also that it is possible on low fertiliser rates, and looking at the different forms of nitrogen that's available out there, as well as just the traditional, for it seems to go up and down in price a lot. Just again encourages all to register for next week's webinar, again the same time next Wednesday night, and then the following week after that. And just going back to what Stephen mentioned about filling out the feedback form, and I think that's just, for me, is just be brave, sort of, and don't kind of start somewhere, and just don't, if you have just areas suitable graze, get stock out on it, get your silage, try and cut it to maximise the quality of it, and then if you have clover in the field, don't be afraid to stop sowing fertiliser and see will it grow for a while. Because we're in a period where we maybe have to change some of our techniques this farming this last wee while, and sure, for anybody that's trying it, you just have to do it in your own farm to see how it's going to work. There's nobody can tell you whether it'll work, yes or no. You just have to give it a go. But no, that's all from me, so thanks very much for everyone attending tonight.
Thank you very much, Trevor. Thanks, everyone. So have a good evening, and hopefully see you at the next webinar next Wednesday. Thank you.